A letter, written, but never sent, and when it was found decades later, the secret it carried shook an entire family. Emily discovered a yellowed envelope hidden in her grandfather's old trunk. No stamp, no seal. Only a name written on the front, "To Mary, my love." Inside were words written in the heart of war, but this letter never reached its destination. Why was it never sent? What secret was locked inside those lines? And when it finally surfaced, how did it change the past? Welcome to The Last Stand, where we tell the stories of forgotten courage, quiet sacrifice, and memories that never fade. Today, we follow the trail of a letter that was never delivered and the silent truth it carried for generations. Because sometimes, the words left unsent echo the loudest across time. The old farmhouse on the edge of town had been wrapped in silence for years. Its roof bore the scars of countless storms. Its wooden steps groaned with every memory still clinging to the past. This was the home of John Miller, a soldier who had once returned from war and chosen to live quietly, far from the noise of the world. After his passing, the house became a shell filled only with echoes. During her college break, his granddaughter Emily decided to visit. Something in her heart urged her to explore, as if the walls themselves were whispering that there was more to know. She remembered her grandfather's distant eyes at the dinner table, the silence that often replaced his words. Even as a child, she had sensed that behind those eyes lived a story too heavy to be told. She climbed the creaking stairs and entered the small room where John had kept his belongings. In the corner stood an old trunk, its lock rusted with time. With effort, Emily pried it open. Dust swirled in the sunlight as she lifted the lid. Inside were folded uniforms, rusted buttons, a couple of medals, and faded photographs. Just as she was about to close the trunk, something in the corner caught her eye. A folded envelope, yellowed with age. She picked it up carefully. There was no stamp. It had never been mailed. On the front, written in faded ink, were just a few words. "To Mary, my love." Emily's heart raced. Mary was her grandmother's name. This was her grandfather's letter. She opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a fragile sheet of paper, the ink slightly blurred with time, but still readable. The first lines made her catch her breath. "My dearest Mary, these may be the last words I ever write to you. The sky above is dark, but when I think of you, it feels like morning again." Emily sat down, stunned. This was no ordinary letter. Every word carried the weight of war, fear, uncertainty, and love intertwined. "Why?" she whispered to herself. "Was this never sent?" Holding the letter, Emily felt as though she could hear her grandfather's voice. She remembered how he never spoke of the war, how medals stayed tucked away in drawers. Now she understood. His silence had been holding something back all along. At the bottom of the trunk, she found a small notebook. Most of the pages were empty, but on one, written in faint pencil, was a single note. April 12, 1945, the letter never left my pocket. That day, everything changed. Emily's hands shook as she read it. That date, it marked something. Some moment her grandfather had chosen to lock away forever. She carried the letter downstairs and spread out the family albums her grandmother had left behind. There were photos of Mary in her youth, always smiling. In some, John stood beside her in uniform, eyes bright but already shadowed by something unspoken. In one particular photo, his face was half hidden in the shade, as though even the camera had failed to capture his truth. Emily traced her fingers over the photo and then looked at the letter again. Grandma never read this, she thought. So why did Grandpa write it, and why did he keep it hidden? The questions only deepened. But Emily knew one thing for certain. This letter was not just paper and ink. It was the key to understanding her grandfather's silence. That night, Emily placed the letter on her nightstand. Before she fell asleep, she read it one more time, imagining the young soldier who had once bent over this very page with trembling hands. For decades, the letter had remained unsent, a secret folded into the fabric of her family's history. Now it had found her. She whispered into the dark, "Grandpa, whatever happened that night, I'll find the truth. This letter will guide me." The house remained silent, but for Emily, the journey had just begun. April 1945. Europe was burning with the last desperate clashes of the Second World War. While cities crumbled and armies pressed forward, A young soldier named John Miller crouched beneath the dim glow of a lantern, pen trembling in his hand. Around him, the night quaked with distant explosions, yet all his focus was on the sheet of paper before him. The cold air bit at his fingers, but John wrote quickly, as though each word anchored him against the chaos. The earth rumbled, but on the page he tried to capture something different, not fear, but love. Mary, the world here is dark, but your face is the light I carry with me. If this reaches you, know that my last thought was of you. Every line was a shield against despair. He wanted Mary to remember him not as a soldier, but as the man who loved her through every second of borrowed time. John knew the orders by heart. At dawn, their unit would move forward. The men around him murmured nervously, voices low but heavy. Each of them knew what dawn might bring. John folded the page carefully, slid it into an envelope, and pressed it against his chest. He whispered, "If I fall, this will be my voice. Mary will know." Just then, the sergeant barked orders. "Gear up. Night patrol in 5 minutes." John slipped the envelope deep into his inner pocket. Whatever came next, he was determined to keep it safe. Hours later, as midnight thickened, the forest erupted. Muzzle flashes lit the trees, the air filled with shouting. Shells thundered, machine guns tore through the night. John threw himself into the dirt, clutching the rifle, his chest pounding with the thought, the letter, don't lose it, don't let it go. Around him, friends cried out, some falling, others scrambling for cover. John dragged a wounded comrade out of the line of fire, his hands slick with mud and blood. Through it all, he felt the weight of the envelope pressing into his heart. By morning, the unit had retreated. The survivors huddled, exhausted, eyes hollow. John pulled the envelope from his pocket. The corners were smudged, the paper damp with sweat and dirt, but it was intact. He thought of handing it to the field post officer, but his hands froze. The night's images flashed in his mind. Men cut down, friends silenced forever. Mary shouldn't see this. She doesn't need to know what this place does to us, he whispered. He slid the envelope back into his chest pocket. That was the day the letter's journey ended, not in the post, but locked away with him. Emily, decades later, read these lines with tears stinging her eyes. She could almost see him there, bent under the flicker of a lantern, writing love into the dark while death stalked outside his tent. Her chest tightened with questions. Why didn't he send it? Was it to protect Mary? Or was it a wound too deep to open? She folded the fragile letter again, whispering to herself, Grandpa, your silence begins to make sense now. Mid-April 1945. The war's end was near, yet every mile forward was paid for in blood. John Miller's unit moved through the ruins of a small European village, the air thick with smoke and the scent of gunpowder. The world seemed to hold its breath before shattering again. Gunfire erupted without warning. John hit the ground, his chest pressing against the envelope that held Mary's letter. His thoughts blurred with the storm. Survive. Protect the letter. Keep moving. Men screamed. Buildings collapsed. The night split apart in fire and steel. John dragged one soldier to safety, then another, ignoring the weight crushing his shoulders. All the while, the envelope throbbed against his chest, as if reminding him that even here, amidst the carnage, love still bound him to life. Through the haze, John saw his closest friend fall. He rushed forward, but by the time he reached him, it was too late. His friend's hand trembled, then went still, eyes frozen toward the sky. John clenched his jaw, feeling the letter pressing harder into his heart. If Mary ever reads this, her heart will break the same way mine just did. Tears burned, but he shoved them back. He couldn't stop. Not here. Near midnight, John collapsed into a shallow trench. He reached instinctively for the envelope. It was still there, edges torn, corners damp. A shell exploded nearby, sending shards of metal raining down. One jagged fragment struck the watch on his wrist, shattering its glass, freezing the hands at midnight. Time had ended. For John, that broken watch and the unsent letter fused into a single truth. This night would follow him forever. When the battle eased by dawn, the survivors staggered together. John pulled out the envelope once more. Mud stained the paper, but the words inside were still safe. He thought of posting it again, but his hands shook, his mind replaying the faces of those who had not survived. "No," he whispered. "Mary will never see this. She deserves light, not these shadows." He tucked the letter back into his pocket. It would never leave his side, but it would never leave his heart either. From that night forward, John carried not just the letter, but the silence of every man who hadn't returned. Emily stood in the small-town library, the fragile letter in her hands. The ink had faded, but the words still pulsed with life. She showed it to the curator, who adjusted her glasses and whispered, "This isn't just a family keepsake, it's history." Days later, the family gathered in the old farmhouse. Emily's voice trembled as she read the letter aloud. "My dearest Mary, if these words reach you, know that my heart beat only for you. Even in the dark, your face was my light." The room grew quiet. Some wept. Others closed their eyes as if they could see the young soldier bending over his page by lantern light. For decades, John had carried silence, but now his family carried the sound of his heart. Emily insisted the letter should not remain hidden. A ceremony was held in the town square. Standing at the podium, she lifted the envelope for all to see. "This letter was never delivered. My grandfather wrote it in the heart of war, but he chose to keep it, not because he didn't love, but because he loved too much. He carried this silence so others wouldn't have to." The crowd listened in stillness. An elderly veteran in the audience wiped his eyes. "I served near him. He never spoke of it. Now I know why." The town decided to place the letter in the local museum. It was displayed in a glass case with a plaque that read, "John Miller's unsent letter to Mary April 1945. Children on school trips paused before it. Guides told them, some words never reach their destination, yet they can echo for generations." After the ceremony, Emily stood alone before the display. She pressed her hand gently to the glass. "Grandpa," she whispered, "you don't have to carry it alone anymore. We'll carry it with you." For the first time, she felt the silence lift. The letter had finally spoken. This was not only the story of a letter unsent. It was a story of love written in the shadow of war, carried in silence for a lifetime, and finally revealed to heal those left behind. Some letters never arrive. But the love they carry never stops traveling.